Channel. So this video is our 6th writing workshop, and this week we're going to be looking at how to write an autobiography. So the first thing we need to do is talk about what a biography is. So an autobiography is a piece of writing which tells you all about the person's life, and it has to be written by that person. So for example, if you were to write an autobiography, you would write one about yourself. So that's what the auto bit stands for. If you were just writing a biography, you could write that about somebody else's life. Say the best writing comes from a careful plan. So there are 2 different types of plans on there. You could have a go using one of these to help you out if you wanted to. They do say biography, but the plan can be used for an autobiography too. You're just remembering that obviously you're writing this about yourself, but they give you a really good guide about the kinds of things that you might want to include when you're doing the piece of writing about yourself, away from using really boring adjectives. And for this piece of text, what you're more likely to try and find is alternative adjectives, where you're describing yourself or your hobbies or the things that you like. Try and stay away from using really boring adjectives. So things again like dictionaries and thesauruses, you can use them online even if you don't have a paper one in your home, but just improve that level of vocabulary that's in your writing. What can I include? Now there's lots of different things you could include. In an autobiography, but these are the main sort of ideas. So information about you when you were younger. So for example, such as when you were born, where you were born, what you were like as a child. You might tell me more about the things that you like and dislike. You might tell me about your hobbies. What is it that you like to do in your spare time? Tell me a bit about your family. Tell me a bit about what you're hoping to do in the future. And then at the very end, a really brief conclusion or summary of all of the points that you have made above. Again, at that child-friendly TAF that we've been using in the previous videos. You are informing people about the things that have happened in your life. You could also is to inform. You are informing people about the things that have happened in your life. You could also slightly argue that it is to entertain others, because you might embellish on some of the things that's happened in your life, but the main thing here is that we're writing to inform. We should definitely use paragraphs to organise ideas. You may want to have a paragraph for the different sections that we've looked at. Obviously the plan would help you follow that through. Now, describing setting and character, although no, you wouldn't be doing it the same way as you would in a story. If you're telling me something that happened to you when you were little, you might want to describe a little bit about where that's taken place. And then when you're describing character, obviously you're describing yourself, but you may also want to describe the other people that you would write about, such as your friends or your family. Devices to structure the writing. You could use headings and subheadings in this, definitely, but you also don't have to if you would choose just to write it in paragraphs. Bullet points you could use in if you're listing things, and definitely fronted adverbials would work in here. Use mostly correctly capital letters and full stops, question and exclamation marks, commas for lists and apostrophes for contractions. All of those things can definitely be used in here. Specifically the commas for list one would be quite a good one to use, because then you can list multiple things that you like, or list members of your family, or list places that you've been to. So that would be a good sentence to try and get in. Obviously the 3, 4, 5, 6 spelling words, they're very important and you can find them online. And produce legible joined handwriting. Handwriting is always really important. So there are the beginning bits. If you want to make a note of those for the things that you need to use, you can do. And what we'll do is we'll look at some higher level things that we can start to think about. Creating atmosphere, not necessarily, unless you're telling us about something specific that's happened in your life that was quite scary or quite dramatic. But things like similarly, unless you're telling us about something specific that's happened in your life that was quite scary or quite dramatic. But things like similes, metaphors and personification, you could probably still get in there if you're describing a place where something has happened, or you're describing something that you like. You might describe it by using a simile. Speech to advance the action. Now, you don't need speech in this. However, if there is something somebody has said to you in your life that really stands out to you, then yes, you could include speech in it. Obviously, 5, 6 words we've talked about, cursive handwriting, verb tenses consistently. So remember, you're writing about something that's happened in the past. You're telling me all about your life from the past up to present day. So if you then start telling me about things that are happening today in your life, obviously you need to be aware that your tenses will change. Cohesive devices we've talked about. So looking at some of the other types of punctuation, parentheses, semicolons, colons and hyphens, All of these can be used in here. Definitely punctuation for parenthesis, such as brackets, commas and dashes, because there'll be lots of moments here where you could probably add additional information into your sentences just to give me a bit more of an understanding about what it is you're telling me. So here's the complete list with everything that we've added on. We're just going to have a look at the next step, which is obviously greater depth. Will affect the flow of your writing. So there are a couple of things on here that you might want to think about. So that's the difference between formal and informal language. So if it's an adult speaking versus if it's perhaps used a feature, and then just go back and randomly stick it in, because it might not work and it'll affect the flow of your writing. So there are a couple of things on here that you might want to think about. So that's the difference between formal and informal language. So if it's an adult speaking versus if it's perhaps a child speaking, that type of spoken language would be a little bit different. And again, just thinking about all of the pieces of punctuation that we've talked about, but making sure that you're using them in the most effective way. If it doesn't work in your sentence, don't use it. So on your screen now is an example of the beginning part of an autobiography. This is by no means the whole thing, it's just the very, very first paragraph to give you an idea. So it's an autobiography of a superhero. So remember, it's written from the perspective of the superhero. On September the 15th, 1995, so already starting straight away with a fronted adverbial of time, when did this happen? I was born into a warm and loving family. Nice two adjectives there. My father, James Copper, was a taxi driver. Looking there, we've obviously got the name in parentheses, so brackets. And my mother, Kate Copper, worked at the local bank. So again, more parentheses there. We were poor in those days, and both my parents worked long hours to make sure we had an exciting childhood. I remember one time I was playing outside with my brother Harry when he came tumbling off his bike. Interestingly, I remember having this sudden urge to help him out. So again here, we've got lots of different punctuation being used, lots of fronted adverbials being used, and it's almost like you're chatting to the reader. Try not to fall into the trap of making it too informal, so things like a lot of contractions and slang, it's not quite the right level of formality for this. You can have some contractions in there, but just make sure not to overdo them.